But if you're anything like me, as you realize how thin you're able to get some pieces doing this, you're going to go like, well, I haven't broken a single piece, because your expectations of being thin are a lot lower. And then when you start using this and realize how thin you can get it. Hey guys, Ryan Gill here with HuntPrimitive. We're in the ugly shop again today. But it's the best place ever to show you the flint knapping stuff, at least with modern tools. And I've got all of these coral bifaces that I've been working on, and I've been using a different technique, and it works great for basically every kind of material I've worked. Obsidian. I've been doing a lot of this stuff lately with Indirect Percussion. You set them bifaces up so I don't break them. So I want to show you this. This is my new Indirect Percussion stick. Now I've drawn inspiration from a few different places. Ryland Birch, who's a buddy of mine, I met at Silver River. Actually, I met him at my HuntPrimitive gathering first, and then again at Silver River Knapping. He was doing some under the leg indirect percussion with a piece that's like this. And then I was watching Marty Reuter, Flint Knapping Skills. I'll drop a link probably down in the description. You need to go check him out, because he's doing, I mean, phenomenal stuff with flint knapping, and he's using a lot of the aboriginal tools, like antler kind of stuff, which, you know, if you've been following me with any amount of time at all, you know I do a lot of that stuff too. I mean, he's like really dedicated into it. I mean, what a phenomenal napper, and I've learned a lot from him in a very short amount of time in talking with him. And so he was using a stick that had a piece of antler on the end and doing this indirect percussion that was removing large flakes. And I'm trying to always come up with stuff to help my followers, my audience, you know, not necessarily use all the Aboriginal tools. It's a little bit tougher, but can I come up with something that works better? And so what I came up with is the same idea, is using on this side would be a pressure flaking type of bit, which is a 1/4 inch cold rolled copper bit set into a handle. Now of course they do, you can get that to focus on it a little bit, it's wrapped with sinew, which keeps it from breaking, and it's a hardwood handle, it's not a dowel. So I use sparkleberry for this one. Hickory would be another good choice, or elm or hop hornbeam. But the idea is you need a hardwood handle, because otherwise you'll break the dang thing. Or more importantly, on the side that's got the smaller rod flaker, you'll split and blow out. If you use like a dowel rod, like a dowel rod's easy. You can go to the and buy a curtain rod at the home improvement store. But as soon as you put it in here and you start beating on it, you're just going to blow that piece apart, because it's all got grain run out. So that's the importance of using a hardwood stick. So that's also the inconvenience of this, and I do sell these on my site, HuntPrimitive.com. They're a tad bit pricey. They're not bad. It's a really good investment overall, but I always encourage people, you don't have to buy stuff from me. If you want to search around and find the plastic versions of this, I don't like the plastic tools very much. I really like wood. Even if I'm going to work with copper, I still prefer the wood feel, without a doubt. But you can make your own, but the problem is by the time you buy all the components and put the time into doing it, you could have probably just went to my website and bought it. And I think right now you're looking at like 30 bucks for one of these, but they last pretty much forever. So in all honesty, unless you love to build stuff, I would buy one. But it's not going to hurt my feelings if you don't go buy one either, because I just want you to get this technology and use it. And that's something I kind of, you know, really also showing the inspiration from Marty Reuter, is he's just got this passion to share information and get more skills in front of people. And that's what it's about. It's not about selling the tool. It's about passing along the information. But we're going to use this today with a wood mallet, and I'm going to show you how we're going to use the copper version of this. And then, of course, I can almost guarantee you, as we move through some of these flint knapping series here recently we're going to start working more and more with antler tools. So I want to start people off, obviously, back way at the beginning, which starts off with the video. I will drop a link down in the description for that if you've not seen it, but hopefully you have. It's the flint knapping for beginners, and that's where we just use a very basic kit and we walk through the basic mechanics of flint knapping, and now we're getting a little bit more involved. But believe it or not, these things are super easy and convenient to use. So let's yank the camera in, I'm going to grab a piece of coral, nice heat-treated coral. I'm really loving this stuff. And, of course, that is available on my website, at least for now. I don't know if I'll ever run out of it, but I'm trying to supply people with some really neat stuff. The coral's a little bit more difficult to work than, say, the Edwards Plateau shirts and stuff that I sell, but this stuff is absolutely gorgeous. And it's got all these weird, you probably can't even really see it in here. In fact, I'm coming in so you can see it, and I'll focus on it. But you can see all these striations that looks like, but actually what that is the coral polyps. So the coral would be facing this way, but they grow outwards. So these were all living organisms at one point, and they continued to build these little homes. And then when the coral had died, it got filled in with silica. And a million years later, we have something that we can nap. So, really pretty stuff. Some of it's got color, like this one here. It's got a lot more beautiful color in it, which actually there's not a lot of color, but it's kind of like a translucent color. So I got some reds and orange and blue and stuff like that in there. Pretty neat stuff. Again, all that stuff is available on my website, HuntPrimitive.com. Whether you want to get it from me or not, that's okay. But if I don't tell you where to find it, you're just going to ask me where to find that stuff. So, let's yank the camera in. I'm going to show you how this stuff works, because it is so dang super cool. Okay, so here's the beauty of it. Now, if you're used to watching any of the other stuff we do, we're taking these copper billets, which I very much love, and we're swinging and knocking pieces off. Now, this is still very much a go-to method. The indirect percussion is not just a replace all. It's another tool in the toolbox. I don't just, now that I do indirect percussion stuff, I don't just abandon this. I still use this all the time. But what it is you start to learn. The more that you use all of these different tools, the more you'll get to a point where you know you can do the job better with a different tool. And that's what makes you a better and better napper. So, I still start off with the larger of the boppers that I use and sell. And there's a nice little piece. I'll set that aside for a little tiny point. I still like to use these size boppers by hand because I can work a piece very, very quickly. Okay? And then, once I get this kind of biface the direction that I'm wanting to go, but I know I'm going to start, I have to make more accurate and direct hits, that's when I'm going to start switching over to the indirect. So hang with me here for just a minute, because I want you to see it in action. And obviously that's why you're here, is to see us biface with indirect percussion. So we're kind of getting there. I've got some angles here. You know what I am going to do is pop that back out just a little bit to give me a couple cleaner platforms, get some of this cortex. It's such a beautiful piece of rock, I know. Alright, so we got to a point where I think we're done with this initial percussion, at least to the point that I want to show you with this. So let's work with that, and it's going to be, it's up under your knee, and you got to clamp down on it pretty good. Now I got a little box I put my my foot up on so I can really clamp it in. Now when I'm doing the side that's got the little pressure flaker, I like to do it and leave it stick out here in the middle. And this is how I can run these little pressure flakes like that. It's still indirect percussion, but it's more pressure as opposed to percussion based, if that makes any sense. Now this one, when I use this side, I stick the rod out a little bit further, and then I'm going to lay it across my leg. And the idea is this gives me some stability, and I can actually still hit it on my leg and it doesn't hurt. But of course, remember, I have a napper's leg, so it's kind of hard to hurt me here anyway. And I think that I'm still learning a little bit about it. Some of it, I'll actually touch the rock to it when I hit it. But for the most part, my favorite thing to do is get it where I want it and leave just a little bit of space. And of course, now I'm not looking very good because usually I'm removing great flakes with it. There we go. So we're blowing these nice flakes off if you leave a little bit of space. So it's still percussion, but now let me set this platform up. And this is interesting too. is you can get it just close enough to like even batter an edge. See how that works? Where I'm kind of just battering the edge, but I get it just close enough that it hits it. And then braid that off, and then dry flakes. Now these things go about everywhere, of course. They don't stick in your hand nearly as well as it does when you're just freehand napping. But you can move out pretty quick on it, and then, there you go, that's a decent one. If you get to where you got a bigger platform, then obviously you just move it in closer. And you can blow those right off too. There we go. And it doesn't hurt, like it looks like it hurts, but it doesn't. And the idea that if you leave it straight out, I think that works too. But I don't have nearly the control, and that's why I like putting it up on this leg, because it keeps it in the same spot. And you can slide it right up to the tool. So even if I want to put it out here, I can do that. And then it depends on the control I'm looking for. And I did notice that with watching Marty Reuter do it, that his is usually really close. And I think that's just preference in working the tool in general. But it does. It probably gives you a little bit of control. And then also, it absorbs a little bit of the shock, I think, with your leg as well. So your leg absorbs some of the shock that is oftentimes forced down into the rock. So that way you're less likely to break the point. But you see these beautiful flakes that come off of this. So it's just like percussion napping, which again, it's not a complete, and it's so easy to continue to work like this where you just spread that apart, because I still love hand percussion work. It's not a complete replacement. Now can I just make a point with nothing but this and nothing but the other side and then pressure flake it? I absolutely can, but the more I've messed with it, the more I've really learned it's not a replacement, it's just another tool in your toolbox. And so once you get to some of these points where you're afraid you're going to shock the blade and break it, the indirect can help you from breaking the point. And now I can move faster with this. Okay, can you see how much faster? I mean, I move pretty quick with this too, but I can move pretty quick. But now is one of those points where I'm starting to get to where if I get a little bit too excited with it, or in too much of a hurry, I stand a chance of breaking the blade in half. So I can just bring this right back over. I had a nice abraded edge there. There we go. Knock that piece off. Nice piece there. Beautiful thin flakes. And it's kind of just like letting the tools play to their strong suit. And then, in some instances, like I said, if it's not removing, like I don't want to just force this to work and say, well, remove this, but it's not. I had a little bit of a hinge there, and you could see it was fighting me a little bit, and it's like you just switch tools and methods, and now all of a sudden you can drive beautiful flakes again. So it's, like I said, it's not a replacement for percussion. But when you get to the point where the direct percussion is not working as well as you would like it to, that's when you can use the indirect percussion. So to me, I've been napping for a lot of years, but I'm also fairly stubborn when it comes to my technique, because I don't like to spend a lot of time on stuff that I'm not super comfortable with. So my learning curve has actually been a little bit slower than most other people that really give things a fair shake. And I've messed with a lot of different indirect. I've messed with indirect where you're taking and you're squeezing pieces between your legs like this and then hitting it, and I have almost no success that method is not for me. And when I started into this under the leg that holds it, and then you can move it here, you can move it here, you can do all kinds of different stuff, I really started to see the benefits of this indirect percussion. And I really, from the bottom of my heart, say, if you're like me and you're a little bit stubborn and you've not messed with it, really spend a little bit of time, even one day, getting a handle on how it works. And don't be afraid to break a little rock, because man, it is so worth it. You can do a lot of this basal work, like on the back of this, where that's one of your biggest points of stress in the middle of a blade, that you could break it, and it takes a lot of the shock out of the point, I think, especially when it hits your leg. So definitely want you to give that a try. But let's go ahead. I want to work through this a little bit more. All I want to do is make a biface, just like the other ones that I did, because when it comes down to the finish work and we use the other side, which I may use it as we get closer to the end of the biface, but I have another video. I don't know if it's coming out soon or if it's already out. I haven't decided. I filmed one yesterday, but I haven't released it yet. And it's making a Cahokia point. Some of the new, really refined Cahokia points that I'm making right now. And I showed using the other side. And it is just, what an efficient method of getting points really thin. So if it is out, I'll drop a link down in the description. If it's not out, subscribe, follow along, hit that bell notification, so in a week or 2 or 3 or whatever, you can catch that video as well, and learn a little bit more about it, just like I have, because it's really opened a lot of doors for me. Like I've always said, when I'm a very specialized flint knapper. I make my hunting points. I'm really good at sharpening a point, and I'm good at just rough bifacing out and making little arrow points and my atlatl points that I use and knife blades. But the overall skill of flint knapping, I'm not as well versed as many of these other guys that's all they do is really flint knap. See, I'm spread really thin. I'm doing bow making, arrow making, atlatls. I'm out hunting with this stuff all the time, and I'm flint knapping, and I'm making tools and shooting and editing video, and it's like I've got way too many irons in the fire to devote as much time to just flint knapping as some of these other guys, and they have some phenomenal skill. And I figure if I can just learn a little bit here and there from them, it's only going to make my skill level rise. So, okay. Now we're getting to that point where it's like I'm almost like I like to use this because it's new and it's cool, but I need to take a break from it because it's not doing what I need it to do. And I'm going to switch over to that little rascal, like I call it, and I can get some great freehand with that. Beautiful work. And usually once I get to this point, using a little rascal, that's when this is done, then I flip it over, at least thus far in my progression of using these tools. That's when I flip it over and I start doing the indirect with the rod end of the flaker, or the rod end of the indirect stick. So see, we're getting some beautiful flakes off there. I don't want to push it. See, when they don't come off real easy, if you start forcing them, that's when you break a piece, because you're sending a lot of shock up into it. So we're going to take off all the flakes that the little rascal wants to take off. But I don't want to force it. I'm going to work back to this one. There we go. Nice flake. Maybe one more. Not going to force it. Do the other side. And we need a good one right Now, didn't go, did it? There, we got it. Alright, got a little bit here at the base. It's a little bit crude still. That's the one thing about coral, is coral's not, it's very beautiful, it's very glassy in some ways, but it's not super forgiving. That's actually why it costs more money. It should be cheaper because it's more difficult to work, but it's not, because it's really difficult to spall. So you take all these heads of coral, and there's a lot of waste. So it takes a lot of time to spall and heat treat good spalls of coral. So if you ever wondered why, well, on my website I'm like, coral's a little bit more difficult to work, it's pretty stuff, but it actually costs more. It's because it takes more time, and it is pretty, man, and it is sharp too. It's almost like Eastern obsidian. It's really, really sharp stuff when it's heat treated. There we go. I still love my freehand work a lot. And it was funny because when I first started doing freehand work, I didn't like it very much because it was a new learning curve. Man, it's really opened up some doors for me. So, get some of that done. I think we're done with the big side. I'm just going to go ahead and put that up before I'm tempted to use it again. And I'll clamp this one in instead. But I'm not quite ready for it. I still want just a little bit more. Whoops, I took one a little bit too deep right there. Not the end of the world. I just made our biface a little smaller. That's what happens sometimes. It's flint knapping overall. That's kind of the inherent danger of billet work or freehand work, is one wrong hit and your piece is automatically smaller. That's what I do kind of like about that. And I'm probably at a point now, we'll see. And what I'm doing here is, again, tucking it under my leg. And I want to put, I don't want this to, any space to be in here, like I did on the larger side. What I want to do is actually put it right where I want to hit and then lift up on it slightly. And so that keeps it really solid. Now, of course, your angles are going to depend. If you're trying to run an angle like this, that's a lot of pressure. And that's something that I don't think I can even explain to you, other than, because I've even noticed the difference between different rocks, the different angles that you can get away with. But on some of this, I want you to pick up and almost keep it just slight, like here would be parallel with it. Now I just want to be slightly down. And if it's not removing much of a flake, and then that's the difference too here. There's a neat little tip, is sometimes if you're trying to drive a flake, you know, and you're tilting this down, but sometimes if you're trying to build a platform instead of stopping and coming over here and working, is you can tilt this thing way up like this and actually put the flaker on top of it and just work on building your platform just like this. So it's kind of like small scale battering. Then I braid that off, and then this is where you can come in to drive a better flake. See, that drove a pretty good flake there, all the way across. Or not all the way across, but pretty well into it. And then how you hold the piece makes a difference too, because you'll find some ways divert the shock wave different than holding it like this, which is so weird for me to hold stuff underhand essentially when I pressure flake. But this is the way I like to do it the most. See, I think I caught that. Now I didn't. Well, I had a little bit of it. I'm sure you can see at the bottom they are just absolutely flying off. That's probably one of the only real downsides, is my debitage pile has always just been here as I work and I dump and I work and I dump, and if I freehand it's right here. With this stuff I have flakes everywhere, in the shop. So when it's sweep up time, it's like, now I got to sweep everywhere, because every now and then you got them, they'll shoot across the whole dang room. And that's also why, as much as here in Florida time, even though I've got an air conditioner and stuff like that, it can get hot, so I wear shorts. I have learned, do not do indirect percussion with shorts or barefoot or anything like that, because you will literally drive these flakes into your skin. And I've got tough skin. I mean, I'm a napper. I walk through thorns. I got tough feet, tough legs, tough hands. But when you're doing stuff like this, you can flat drive a flake straight into your foot or your leg over here. Ooh, that was a good one there. It ran just about all the way across. Alright, so now I'm going to take a pressure flaker, and I'm actually going to build a platform. It's definitely not thin enough that I can just pressure flake through the rest of the piece. So whether I was doing freehand or indirect, I still may go back to a little bit of freehand with Little Rascal, but for the most part, I'm to a point where I stand a little bit higher chance of breaking it freehand or with direct percussion. But I'm probably, I mean, he's still in a situation where you can break with indirect. I mean, that's a thing. It's not like it's just break proof, but you're less likely to make some severe mistakes with indirect. I think it's when you're trying to get it too thin, because here recently I've been doing some pieces bifacing out, and they're going so beautifully thin. I start challenging myself, well, how thin can you get this? And at some point, I mean, you can only get a piece so thin before it just can't handle the shock of anything. Almost, I even got to where I've got them so thin with indirect, and then I pick up a pressure flaker and I pressure flake and I snap the dang thing in half because they've been that thin. And it's fun to see a piece get that thin, but it's not super practical either. Like, it's fun to nap and accomplish that, but realistically, I don't want to hunt with a point or use a knife blade that's that thin that it breaks that easy, that pressure flaking will break it. So find a happy medium, but if you're anything like me, as you realize how thin you're able to get some pieces doing this, you're going to go like, well, I haven't broken a single piece, because your expectations of being thin are a lot lower. And then when you start using this and realize how thin you can get it, then now all of a sudden you start getting like a thin napping elitist, and you're like, well, let me see how thin I can get that. Well, that's not thin enough. And I look across, and there's one more little piece over here, and it's like, you would have never looked twice at that when you were doing direct percussion. But now that you're doing indirect and you can get them thin, you start beating yourself up because you see the potential in it. So that's if you're anything like me. And I'm also a perfectionist to a point, but not to the point that I'm willing to overlook efficiency in the tool. Because efficiency in the tool is the #1 objective for me. I like to look at something that looks pretty, but at the end of the day, I really want something that works well. And I'm not going to destroy a whole piece over one teeny tiny little step fracture, because it's not artistic enough for me. So, you can see, you're probably, if I had to suspect anything, you're probably getting a little excited about the idea of going and trying this for yourself, because, man, is it handy. It's really fun and it's addicting to do, and I have to tell myself sometimes that's not maybe the best job or the best tool for the job, so don't use it, but it's so hard to say no to because it works so dang well. It's like sometimes you need to just pick up and do that, because I mean, I probably couldn't have done that with indirect at that point, just because the hit is different. the shock distribution is different. So I can get to where I run some great flakes with this, but I don't want to forget about my old tools, because they have a purpose as well. And I spent a long time learning what that purpose is. That was a little sketchy. I felt the shock wave in the piece, and it scared me just a little bit. But we're about done with this as far as a biface goes. It's pretty good. Like I'm not trying to finish this out into a point, but realistically what I'm kind of looking for is a long atlatl lance point for something like this. I've been doing a lot of Noonan type bifaces, but at this point in time I'm starting to work on a couple of these a little bit longer lance ones. And I could still turn this into a Noonan, but I feel like I have enough of those right now. And I'm working on some other cool projects that I need some longer lance points out of. So, man, that was a beautiful flake. Man, that's just about done. At least for now, until I really decide what I want to do with it. But I have a feeling it'll be a notched atlatl point by the time it's all said and done. Oh man, that was gorgeous. I wish I could have caught that flake to show you. I mean, that went from here and feathered out all the way over here on this side. Catch that edge. That's the thing too, is you get down to a point like this, I want you to, that went all the way, went a little bit past center. At the beginning stages, you can go a little bit faster and just kind of bang, 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 run through it. When you're getting down, this is just like pressure flaking in a way. I want you to study the piece and be a little bit strategic, because if you go slow and you're strategic about your flakes, it's like anything else. If you stop and study it, and it doesn't, you know, some people study it longer than others, but it doesn't take a long time. But man, you can make some really strategic hits and drive some really, really, really good flakes across the piece. And I think I just want a couple more because I'm getting greedy. We got one little high spot. That's the danger of being greedy, not gonna lie. You're trying to make things perfect. And reality is, they don't need to be any more perfect than they are. But get her to focus up on that. That's just a biface. It's nothing fancy. I'm going to make the camera focus on that here. So, just a biface. That's it. Wasn't out of control. You can see it still needs cleaned up. And I can still use a little bit more indirect on it, but realistically what I'm probably going to do is I'll probably come back and do some notches in this and make something a little bit more late archaic, or not even late archaic, but middle archaic atlatl pointish with it, which would really be a stemmed point, but doesn't have the shape that I'm really looking for a stemmed point, but I want something with a little bit more sleek front on it, because I've been doing a lot more bull-nosed Noonan style points, which there's a lot to be said about that, because we're doing a Noonan study as well, but really when you're shooting for this streamlined shape of having a more tapered with this tip geometry, they penetrate so much better. But that's a topic for a different day. But anyway, there you go. We biface that one out, and we'll add it to the collection. And realistically, if I decide I want to make a Noonan out of it, what I'll probably do is just trim the base to here, and then go ahead and put my stem notches in, and I'd have just another Noonan point at the end of the day. But overall, I think we accomplished what we needed to. So again, thanks for watching. Stick with us here, HuntPrimitive.com. Subscribe, hit the bell notification, whatever. If you want to make one of these, it's a 1/4 inch cold rolled copper rod, and it's set back in here all about 2.5 or so inches. The hole's drilled in. I even glue it in there, but it's tight anyway. It's wrapped with sinew so you don't blow it, but you can't use a dowel rod. You're going to have to use a hardwood stick, not like willow or something. You got to use a hardwood. hickory, sparkleberry, elm, something like that. And then this is a 3/4 inch copper cap, and there's no filler in this. It's a copper cap that's just fit, and it's glued onto the end. And I also take a peening hammer and I peen this to dig into. So if you get one of these, you'll notice it's not usually super clean because I've peened the edges so it bites into the wood a little bit more. But it's a phenomenal tool. It's about 15-16 inches long, and it's a good multi-use tool because instead of having to have two, we have the larger indirect percussion side, and then we also have the very fine indirect percussion side. So thanks for watching, and we will catch you on the next adventure. Do please hang with us because, man, I am ramping my YouTube channel up here in 2020. So I hope to see you around in the comments a lot more.